So let me just open up with a couple of brief remarks about where we are and why we're holding the event this morning. So with the announcement last Friday of the Commissioner of Education's recommended charter applications for 2013, the Board of Education's vote will occur next Tuesday on those recommendations. And with most of the seats associated with the 2010 Education Reform Law filling up fast, today is, I think, a very timely discussion, a very timely opportunity for us to sit back and talk about where do we go next. So a couple of just framing thoughts. First and foremost, I think when we started on the charter school experiment here in Massachusetts 20 years ago, no one would have expected the level of success that we've had. And the success here in Massachusetts is remarkable, with about 80% of the charter schools in Massachusetts outperforming their district peers, 10% performing at about the same level and 10% below. That is a level of consistency that I think the rest of the country is envious of. We've also seen many attempts in law and through policy at the state level to replicate charter schools' successes in the district schools. Whether pilot schools, unionized charters, Commonwealth pilot schools, innovation schools, extended learning time, these are all, if you will, flattering. These are ways of saying what's going on in the charter schools is working. We want to emulate that. We want to build on that in the district schools. The problem with some of these models is that each of those models builds on one aspect of the flexibility within charter schools and doesn't take the whole, if you will, enchilada. It takes just pieces, and pieces sometimes don't add up to the whole. The whole requires a level of flexibility and autonomy at the school level, as well as a far higher level of accountability. I think a couple of things we should note that are unique to Massachusetts. And first and foremost, it is the unique start of the charter school effort here in Massachusetts, as well as education reform as a whole. And that is, it did not start as a partisan effort. It was Bill Weld, a Republican. It was Tom Birmingham, a Democrat, and Mark Roosevelt, a Democrat, who put this together. And as a result, I think we've had sort of longevity and sustainability within our implementation strategy, the seriousness with which we took this on, which was, I think, proven from the beginning with our rigorous approval process, which required a business plan. That was somewhat unique, and I think many states have come to that, to the realization that was actually a very good policy move. Also, we have been pretty good in shutting down charters that aren't working. So we've seen some lifts in the charter school cap in 1997, and again in 2010. Much of the credit for the 2010 lift, I think we all have to recognize that President Obama changed the conversation here, changed the conversation around the country by saying charters actually can be a really powerful tool. We don't have that anymore. There's not going to be a race to the top that's going to help us to lift the charter school cap again. And we have to think about how we move ahead if we want to see some of our gateway cities and to see Boston continue to progress beyond the place where we have 18% of our kids in charter schools. Kara Kendall, who is a senior fellow at Pioneer Institute, has done a great job in two papers, one in 2010 and one today, scoping out what's changed in the law, some of the strings that have become attached to charter schools that are tethering them down, and may also prove to be counterproductive in the future. Rather than learning the lessons from charter schools and applying them, sometimes our state policymakers want to change, morph our charter schools back into something that's a little more similar to what they're used to, the district school model. We'd like to work in the opposite direction. So with the Board of Education vote next week on 5 new charter schools and 11 expansions, we are growing ever closer to filling all of the seats that were made available in 2010 law. I'd just like to remind all of us, as we think about today's conversation, we hear from the speakers, there are 45,000 kids who are still on waiting lists for charter schools now. We could meet that demand, the demand of the parents, by moving ahead with a much more robust approach on charter schools. There's a piece of legislation out there that would lift the cap totally for 29 districts, the lowest performing districts in the state. We think that's probably a pretty good start. But to start our conversation here, I'd like to ask Gerard Robinson to come to the podium. Quick introduction. Gerard served as Florida Commissioner of Education from 2011 to 2012, and prior to that, he was the Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth of Virginia, so therefore brings a variety of different states' perspectives. Previously, he was the president of the Black Alliance for Educational Options, a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose mission is to actively support parental choice, to empower families, and to increase quality educational options for Black children. He's the author of numerous articles on school choice, urban schooling, achievement gaps. He has a lot of experience in all the different debates, facets of the debates we've seen over the past few years, federal level as well as the state level. He received a Master of Education degree from Harvard University, a Bachelor of Arts from Howard University, and an Associate of Arts from El Camino Community College. Please come to the podium.
Good morning. Thank you, Jim, for the very kind introduction. I want to thank Jamie as well for extending to me an invitation to talk about what I believe is one of the most important public policy issues in the United States, and that's education, and most particularly charter school education. The Pioneer Institute has a very special place in my heart for two simple reasons. Number one, in 1993, I was on the staff of Senator Bill Leonard, at that time the Senate Republican caucus leader in the California legislature. And California at that time was the second state in the nation to have a charter law, the first being Minnesota. And we introduced a charter school bill, and while I was in need of some support, had reached out to several people nationwide to provide research, and was able to receive some from different components. Well, one of those people was Linda Brown, who many of you in this room know, and by 1995 I still have in my possession a package that she sent to me on the importance of charter schools and what it will mean for American education. So with Pioneer, it's always a special place. It's always good to come back. I want to share with you briefly a tale of three states. As Jim said, I had an opportunity to see charter schools and really school reform at different levels. And having worked in different states, you meet people with varying degrees of enlightenment and tolerance as it relates to school reform. Let me tell you a tale about three states and what it will mean for what I call partnerships in progress. Let's take Florida, where I was recently commissioner. In Florida, we have over 500 charter schools. We're growing. One of the largest and I could say newest perspectives in what we're going to offer are virtual charter schools. In Florida, our local school boards are the authorizer, not the state. But the state became involved at the point that there was a debate about whether a charter school applicant at the local level receive due process, a just reading. We had nearly 27 charter school applications, all virtual, come to the state. And we as a board had to make a decision on whether to move forward or not to move forward. Well, the short story is, in the majority of the cases, we voted to move forward with those charter school applications so they could open. For one simple reason. We believe that public charter schools are in the public's interest. And whenever we have a public policy that's in the public's interest, we think that's great. But one of the debates, frankly, about virtual schools and what they mean is generational. I, along with many people in this room, did not grow up in an educational system where virtual education as we know it was a part of our landscape. I'm fortunate to have three daughters. I have one who's a sophomore in college, and my youngest daughter is 2. So obviously I like challenges. And it was interesting with the middle daughter who turned 5 yesterday. Her idea of education and the iPad and the iPhone and to give credences to other organizations and businesses is very different than a 21-year-old. And I was fortunate to be a stay-at-home dad for 2 of them for the first year of their life. The role that technology is playing is very different. And some of our concern is generational, not so much educational. And so, power of partnerships. I heard from local school board members who said, Gerard, I think virtual education is fine. I think charter schools are great. But to be honest with you, I'm not sure how a virtual charter school will work in our education system. I heard the same thing from applicants. And so I reached out to the leader of NACSA, the National Association for Public Charter School Authorizers, and we put together a partnership. For the first time in Florida, we had a partnership with NACSA where they traveled to our state and provided 2 in-person workshops on how to evaluate, how to look at, and how to ask questions about approval or even denial of a virtual charter school. 2 were in person, and we had in different parts of the state to make sure we had as much representation. And of course, I made the recommendation, since it's a virtual or a charter school, why not do it virtually? And so we had one that was hosted virtually, and it's available for those to see. The number of authorizers who contacted me and said this was a very good informational session for me because it gave me a chance to ask tough questions that frankly we either couldn't get answered at the local district or the state. But it also put me in rooms with other people who were having some of the same struggles. And so we're going to look 3 or 4 years from now and see the impact of a partnership and policy in a state like Florida, where I see virtual education making a difference. The next state is Virginia, the great Commonwealth, a state where, when I became Secretary of Education, we had 3 charter schools in operation. Now, for people here in Boston, they probably would chuckle because there are more than 3 charter schools, maybe in a 15-block radius. But it was a state with a very weak charter law, a state where Governor McDonnell had pledged that we would do more to change charter schools. He kept true to his word. We introduced a law that moved us further along, probably making some of the more massive changes in the law than we had going back to its founding in 1998. Excuse me, a step in the right direction, but still more progress. Here's a tale of one group who, in Richmond, the capital of Virginia, decided to open up a charter school. And they were going to name it after Patrick Henry, first governor of Virginia. And they said, we want to open up a charter school focused on science with a particular interest on environmental science. And we want to do it within the local community, and we want to make it work. The governor had gone to speak on behalf of the school and why it was important, again, to the public interest of the school system. The school board superintendent shared with me, I think public charter schools are great. I simply have questions about management, about curriculum, honest questions. I talked to school board members. Some liked the idea, some did not. And so what I realized, again, is that here's a local group who had never created a public enterprise called a public school, who now wants to create charter school. And so I decided again to use the power of what I call partnerships or power of progress through partnership. I contacted Jane Ellis, who works for Self-Help Incorporated. It's a North Carolina-based nonprofit institution which provides capital and seed money to organizations. She was able to provide a $250,000 grant, which was a lifeline for the school at a point they needed to use those funds to support the opening of their school. They started off, as many charter schools do, in a church. They started off there, moved forward, was able to use that loan, and today I'm proud to say they're actually in a very fine building. Are there still struggles? Absolutely, but through the power of partnership, they were able to open up the 4th charter school in the city. The mayor has now made a strong push to see that we expand options. The governor, and likely the other governors who move forward, will have the same position. Small group trying to open up a charter school, and as you'll hear from others, most of our charter schools in the country are still mom and pop individual. There's a role for the for-profits and the nonprofits, but it was good to see. Let me share with you the last state and the last story, and that's the state of Georgia. I was appointed by the Lieutenant Governor to serve on the Charter School Commission. I was the first statewide commission to authorize charters statewide. As in many states, initially the only authorizer, well, there were 2. There was a local school board, but there was also a state authorizer, but with that state authorization came state money only, no other funds, and so it was real tough to operate schools. So we approved schools, and lo and behold, we were sued. I was a defendant in that case. It ultimately went to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court of Georgia ruled that allowing a state body appointed by elected officials to approve charter schools violated the Georgia Constitution. And I can tell you, there was a lot of concern about what would happen to A, the schools we approved, and B, what kind of message would it send to those who wanted to open charter schools, and was this a death blow to charter schools as we knew it in Georgia? And so the partners came together. We've got a great partnership with Tony Roberts and the Georgia Charter School Association. We work with roller-like organizations like Pioneer with the Georgia Public Policy Institute. And after a year and a half of work getting requisite signatures to put the initiative on the ballot, I'm proud to say that in November, 50 of those who cast votes, it passed by 59%. 2.1 million Georgians said it was important. They said, and as the language would read, to provide school improvement and parental involvement through public charter school options. And it passed, and so now we see a new breath of fresh air. Those are simply 3 tales from 3 states. As with Massachusetts and others, all states are different. But the one thing that's going to keep the charter school movement important is the power of partnerships. Public, private. It'll include our superintendents, for those who support us. It'll include our teachers. It would also include roller-like organizations, the Pioneer Institute, and in different states, our free market-based institutions, who frankly have been the ones holding the torch for school reform for many years, before it was popular, before it was sexy, and before it was profitable. And so I want to thank them for that. But I also want to say that it was also partnerships with the National Alliance of Public Charter Schools, now under the leadership of Nina Reese, who supported our work in Virginia to help move the conversation forward. So with that, again, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to see that this conversation in Massachusetts will mature. I want to also thank Massachusetts for being a leader in many ways in the charter school area, and I always look forward to our friendship and partnership. Thank you.